gonna interrupt this for a pick. The Detroit Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. I'm staying positive. I know. I'm staying positive. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs reminds me of Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara was taken in the 3rd round.
I mean, we look at some of the needs here: wide receiver, tight end. Is that D line? I guess?
Defensive interior.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's some really good tight ends on the board. Do they do something like that?
Yeah. I mean, if you're Detroit, though, you think about the history of that. Like, it's a good question because you've obviously been in this chair. Eric Ebron, Brandon Pettigrew, TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
When your franchise has swung the bat at that position, especially when it's a position like tight end that doesn't go in first round a lot, you've swung the bat at that position and it hasn't connected quite all that long. Does that influence how you're? Because I know Detroit's been marred with this in there. I mean, you think about Charles Rogers, Mike Williams, and then Roy Williams,
Sure.
3 consecutive wide receivers taken in round 1. Like they're a like does that can't factor in? You're right. It can't factor in, can it?
I think no. I don't think so. I think it's a good thought on your part, and it factors into the fan base and maybe some of the people in the building who have been around that long. No, look, I think a tight end would be a nice addition for them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, depending on where they go with their quarterback situation. Look, I am such a believer. I like TJ. We talked about that.
Yeah.
I really did. I don't still know why they decided to move him, and in division as well.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Well, I felt like they were like 1-5, 1-6
Yeah.
at the time. They didn't know that they were any. Well, they hopefully they knew they were good, but like it was one of those where they kind of came on at the end, but they were selling pieces. And now you think about Minnesota only has 5 picks, so they have Hawkinson, but they only have 5 picks. In many ways, they did kind of hurt their division rival in some ways, although Hawkinson's a great player. But yeah, I mean, tight end's one of those positions, as you know, having picked up Hayden Hurst and. Like those guys, they graduate, they get better later in their career, right? So that's the tough part about them being a first round pick is just that it takes forever for them to kind of grow into that role. Detroit's still on the clock here, about 3 minutes left for the Lions, and after that it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then after that it's the Seattle Seahawks. And who do we have here? Wow.
That's a big one. If I'm seeing what I'm seeing.
Wow. Okay. So,
wow.
Jack Campbell, linebacker, Iowa.
That, you know what that just completely speaks to?
They just need toughness.
Chris Spielman in the house.
Yeah. Chris Spielman.
This guy, go ahead. I mean,
I look, Jack Campbell's a good player. I mean, look, and I know, you can go to the Sumer Sports Show with Eric Eager and Thomas Dimitroff. Please subscribe on all your podcast platforms. We talked about all the linebackers, and I said Jack Campbell's a football player. That's a football player.
Yeah.
That's a football player. But at 18, when no other linebacker is supposed to go in round 1, there's a conviction in Detroit. Detroit's doing what they want here.
Detroit is doing what they want, and they have a plan. I'm saying that because they wouldn't make these moves if they don't know, if they've not done their research. There's no way in the world, right? These are good football players. Okay, we all imagine that they're reaching or whatever people want to say or the fan base does. I mean, he's a good football player. We talked about it. To me, he just screams Dan Campbell, Chris Spielman. And I know Chris is not calling the shots at all, but Chris is there. Chris is around. He's around Brad Holmes, and they know when they talk about restoring the roar, they want to get the people in that spot. And this is a guy that they think can be a tough, hard-ass guy moving forward.
Well, and you look at this like, look, they were 9-8. They missed the playoffs because they tied with Seattle. Seattle beat them 48-45 in I call it Pontiac just to be funny, but in Ford Field. Rashad Penny rushed for like 200 yards in that game, right? Like when they were at their worst, they could not stop the run. And, I don't know if linebackers necessarily what's going to stop them from being, like you need guys up front. You need the fatties to hold the point. But, oh my gosh, this is a conviction by Brad Holmes. Like he wants what he wants. And look, who's the beneficiary of this, right? If you need a wide receiver, you need that fourth quarterback. If you need another corner, like when you see other positions go off the board before you, you're the beneficiary because you're picking a pick ahead of what you were expected to.
Where are they in your mind right now? I know we won't want to do this that much with the corner position, because there are still some corners on the board, of course. To get rid of Okudah, like, where are they on the starting side of this corner position for them? Are they that comfortable, or are they not?
Well, they got, what is it, Sutton from the Steelers, I think that was a guy that they acquired, and then they got was it Emmanuel Mosley from the 49ers, and then they went ahead and got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So they have one layer of depth. But the issue is, if any of those guys get hurt, you play in a dome, and like that's bound to happen. That's a problem. Now, Monty Aguilar is gone, right? He's a guy who had 6 interceptions for them in 21. He fell out of favor last year, was benched. Okudah has been traded to the Falcons. Yeah.
Well, look,
they're drafting like they're a team that's on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
like this is what you do. Like when you pick the last pieces, and that's interesting.
Well, there's a run and hit element to him. He's a tough ass. He's from Iowa. They love that type of player. That's Dan Campbell, of course. That's organizationally, it is a guy you could build upon. Where you could have gotten him. You're suggesting, and he was suggested to go in the second round. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like that was kind of where he was planning to go. So
look, I've moved up out of what I thought someone was a second rounder, and I did it years ago, of course. And it was in the first year with Matt Ryan, and we needed a tackle, and we move up for Sam Baker. Sam should have been in the second round. Now, we didn't move up to this point, but we moved up into the first round to make sure we solidified someone who was probably 5 to 8 picks higher than we should have gone.
Yeah. The roar is tenuous at this point right now. Look, I still think they're a plucky team. I'm a huge fan of Brad Holmes. I'm a huge fan of a lot of people that work there too. This is somewhat in jest, of course. Like, this is a fun event, and Jack Campbell is a good player. By the way, for the betting folks out there, never, ever pick the favorite in first linebacker, first safety, first running back in the NFL draft, especially when they're supposed to go in the round 2, because it's all about styles make fights. Somebody when they're all back there, right? When there's not a Bijan Robinson, when there's not a Micah Parsons, when there's a bunch of guys that are kind of mid-tier guys, and you want to take one of them, it's always going to be, what kind of player do I like, not which player do I like. And so if you're betting the draft, just know that, because that's that can come up and bite you.